r/AskReddit. Reddit. What is your best instant karma story? My 3-year-old came out of her room and punched me in the butt. She turned to run away and ran into the wall. I laughed. Toddlers are little shits. I witnessed a road rage incident where a man got out of his car at a red light, went to the door of the driver of a minivan and yelled at the window for a minute. When the light turned green, he went to get back in his car, but his door was locked. This is beautifully simple and I can just imagine the look on the man's face. Confusion, then realization, then rage, followed by shame. Glorious. I had food poisoning near the end of my shift. I only had an hour left, but somehow thought I could make it. I am brown skinned and my face was white and green. I was sick as shit. I had to keep excusing myself to the restroom. My manager came right out and said, "Don't even think you're going home early." I just moaned and ran to the bathroom again. A few days later, she comes in. I've never seen anyone look as sick and standing on 2 feet. She shuffles in. Can't pick up her feet. No makeup. Pale. Green. A little puke on her shirt. She goes into the higher-ups' office and begs to go home. I was in the break room right next to his office and heard the sweet music myself. He said, "No, I need you here. We have extra shirts and aprons if you want one. I can't have you gone today." Haha. When I was a kid, about 9 or so, my dad and I were at the airport food court eating while waiting on our flight. My eyes were bigger than my stomach and I didn't touch my fries. Rather than throw them away, I asked some lady if she wanted them free. Of course. When we get to the main lobby for our flight, lo and behold, who do we see? Yup, that same lady. She was in the main kiosk as a flight agent, and she let us know she gave us a comp upgrade to business class. That was the first time I had ever flown business class. Edit. Thanks for the gold, kind stranger. First time getting gilded. This is like Reddit business class, right? In 6th grade we had a substitute who might have been insane. She would show up and start yelling about the most random things. Most people were too afraid to talk when she was in class. One day she was subbing another class and stopped me on my way to the office. She told me how terrible my class was and how bad of a person and student I am. I was a quiet straight A kid. I kept walking and she followed. She stared at me while talking and walked into a large metal pole. I just kept walking when she fell to the ground. I was commuting into Atlanta for a work matter. Dude in a nice car was cutting lanes and going like 90 miles per hour. 2 cars in front of me, he cuts off a Dodge Charger and it flicks on its undercover lights. It made my day since Atlanta traffic was terrible and everyone living in GA knew that. But it was douchebags like this that would take your commute time from an hour to 2 hours because they were careless and crashed. As a teacher, I get to experience instant karma daily. One that sticks out in particular: I had a student when I was teaching at a middle school who was loud, obnoxious and willing to do anything for attention. We had just finished an exam which required stapled papers in order to be turned in and he kept hitting the stapler against his hand with it open. All I said was, "Hey, if you keep hitting that stapler against your hand with it open, it probably won't end well for you." He responded with, "I do this all the time. I've never been stabbed." Click. Student lets out the loudest scream I've ever heard. Bleeding. Crying. I'm laughing. On the inside hopefully. And sent him out to the office. A guy stole my bike from a rack a couple of weeks ago. When people approached him, he took off on foot and got hit by a car, making it much easier for the police to find and arrest him. The poor woman that hit him was distraught and convinced she killed him, but he ended up with just some scrapes and bruises. Edit. Okay, here's what happened. The guy was only able to ride about 2 blocks before me and my mom pulled up in her car, ordering him off the bike. Other people joined in. He hopped off the bike, apologized. He even put down the kickstand and started running the opposite direction, presumably trying to make it to the train station a couple blocks away. He only made it a block or 2 on foot before getting hit by the car. We ended up having to identify him in the back of an ambulance along with a couple who saw the whole thing. I felt bad for him because he got off the bike and apologized, but I realized that he would not have gotten hit if he wasn't doing something illegal in the first place. Sorry if I did this wrong, but this is my first time replying. Edit. Typos. Had just passed my driving test in UK and got a car. Knew the road had speed cameras on, so was being very careful, and this van behind me was tailing me. He was obviously annoyed at me observing the speed limit, overtook and got flashed by the speed camera just ahead. Similar story. I work for a city and know where the police like to set up their speed traps during the day. So I'm going around the corner going the proper 30 km/h because it's a school zone, though it feels painfully slow because the road is so wide. The dude in the fancy Mercedes behind me got impatient and sped around me only to be flagged down by a police officer around the corner. It felt so good. My dad stopped paying my college tuition without telling me. I would have understood if he told me, which resulted in me going to school to register for classes and being told I couldn't. But I had already signed a semester lease on a condo and ended having to leave campus shortly after and go back home to work full time until I got off on my own. Christmas, my dad had me a $5 lottery ticket in my stocking and I won $30,000. That's still a really shitty thing for your dad to do. Did he ever tell you why he stopped paying your tuition? Got to work and immediately got asked to deal with a difficult customer who had rang the store from a parking bay in our car park. Lady says she has the wrong frozen drink and wants a refund and a replacement, literally a $1. I take out the $1 and try to find out what drink she wants. She goes off because she also wanted a refund for the fries because the event has made her sick to her stomach because of bad customer service. I say that I didn't know she wanted a full refund as it wasn't mentioned on the phone literally as I walked into the office. She keeps going on about how she is now going to be late for the 4 minutes she spent in park and rants for 5 more minutes about service before I tell her that I'm going to get her refund to try and make sure she still gets to her event. She throws the bag of fries at me, hitting me in the chest, and I grab it and walk off to get her refund. Keeps yelling until I get back with the $2.60. Turns out the man behind her watched the whole thing, and because she was in a company car he reported her to the company, Tupperware. She was fired that afternoon. The lady then tried to get me fired saying I caused it and to get compensation. Our customer service team laughed at her and eventually my owner had to call her. When he called her she started swearing at him and he told her, if you're going to swear at me I'm going to tell Tupperware again, and hung up. Only time I think the abused staff member has actually had a big win in my job. I was on the beach with my family. My young brother fell on the water and got a face full of sand. I was laughing my ass off when a huge wave came behind me, hit me hard, and I got a mouthful of salt water. My dad laughed his ass off. A-hole at work was spending all day ducking around on his new phone. This was when iPhones were new, and showing it off before dropping it onto the grill. Grilled apples aren't too bad. You could make a pie. A woman was 70 cents short on her purchase, so I'll let it go. When counting her change I noticed a 1960 silver dime. Is it a valuable dime? It's worth at least 10 cents. I have a friend with muscular dystrophy. We and some other friends had gone to Mitsuwa, a beach in Japanese grocery store. When we came out, a sports car was parked on the goddamn lines between the two handicapped spots, meaning my friend couldn't even get in his van because that space is where his ramp needs to come out. We went into the store kinda thinking maybe they could just make an announcement, but customer service said to call the cops. So, we waited for a while, and finally the young lady who done this dong move came out of the store and went to get in her car. We told her we'd called the cops and she kinda laughed. No, we really called the cops. Luckily the traffic cop pulled up right that moment. She made the girl move and we were able to go on our way and watch her receive, I can only hope, a fairly hefty ticket as we went. ETA, if it helps your karma boner. On another time this exact scenario occurred. A less wholesome friend did indeed key their car. I'm not endorsing it, but it happened. ETA 2. It was the NJNYC location. Don't rub it in with how many Mitsuwas you have, California. I was driving home with some friends and this jack out in the lane next to us kept making shady maneuvers. I would stop at a red light. The light would turn green. He would floor it and start weaving in and out of traffic, cutting people off, squeezing into openings he had no business squeezing into, and almost causing accidents. Then the next light would turn red. He'd slam on the brakes, and we'd end up waiting at the light next to him again. It must have happened at like 5 lights in a row. Finally he finds an opening, punches it, and just speeds off into the distance, probably going double the speed limit. About a mile down the road we see a cop on the side of the road with his lights on, and somebody pulled over. We are all like, oh please let it be this ducking a-hole. Sure enough, we drive by, see that it's him, and everybody just starts laughing. It was so satisfying. I was driving home late one night and was in the freeway going reasonably fast. There was no one else around, except one car coming up behind me super fast. I expected him to pass me, and he did, but then he cut me off really hard, for seriously no reason other than to be a dong. Then sped off. I literally throw a hand up and look around like WTF, did anyone see that shit? And a highway patrol guy pulls up next to me, salutes, and chases after him with his lights on. I saw them pulled over a few miles down the road. My friend constantly harps on how slow I drive. I drive the speed limit. She drives like a harpy trying to bust out of hell. A couple of months ago she threw a huge fit that she wanted to drive herself to dinner because I'd get us there way too late. So she drove herself and I drove separately. I got there on time and was waiting for 20 minutes when she finally walked in. Apparently she was pulled over on the way in. It ended up being a $200 plus ticket which she beached she would fight. I just smiled and said I had no problems getting there on time. Trying to get home to my parents for Christmas in a blizzard and a guy started tailgating me on the highway, flashing his lights, the works. This goes on for a mile or so until I slow to a crawl enough for him to get the hint to go around. He speeds off and about a half mile down the road I see him facing the other way on the side of the road. Fianca and I were in a car. She was driving. I didn't think she noticed a red lot, so I pointed out the light was red and she gave me a lecture about her knowing how to drive and how she doesn't need my input. Whatever. On our way back from where we were going she runs a red light and totals her car. Playing tug of war with the girlfriend's dog. Win the rope. Throw it across the room except my aim is shit and I take out a framed picture of her and said dog. Grab my glass of wine to take a drink. Dog saunters back over with the rope. Puts his snout under my arm to get attention. Flips his head back, thus throwing my wine holding hand into the air. Full glass of wine showers all over me. TLDR. Duck up dog's picture. Dog ducks up my hoodie. About a month ago I ran to a craft store for yarn. In the same parking lot as the craft store there is a McDonald's. There was a homeless man with a sign near the McDonald's essentially saying hungry anything will help. It was cold and windy as heck. I pulled through the drive-thru, got him a large meal and a large caramel latte, pulled around to the man, gave it to him, went on to the craft store, pick out all my yarn. My total was about $57. The lady at the register asked if I was a member. I said I wasn't and she said well I'll scan this coupon anyways. She saved me $16. That was the fastest the karma gods have smiled on me. Edit. Just wanted to say all the compliments you guys have thrown my way has made my day. Wishing each of you a great day. A few days ago I was with my friend when she got hit in right back bumper of her car. She had the right of way, but there was minimal damage to only her car and she wasn't gonna make a big fuss about it. But the other people were angry and were being verbally aggressive that it was her fault. Like, two full-grown adults super pissed at some high school girls. My friend wanted to just exchange insurance info and phone s and leave since she had to drop me off and go to work, but they called the cops and made us wait for like 20 minutes. They started telling the cops a really twisted story about what happened, making it sound like it was her fault, just being super beachy and sneer. The cop listened to their story with such a genuine and attentive face, says MHM, and writes them a ticket for breaking the law. I was coming home from school with a friend. Early in the journey I slipped on ice, but managed to keep my balance and didn't fall. My friend laughed out loud like a maniac. A few moments later, he fell face down into the ice. In the 90s I bought a newspaper every day from a newspaper box. You stick 35 cents into coin slot to unlock. One day I took 2 papers. As I walked away with both papers, my shirt tail got stuck in the door of the newspaper box. Had to pay 35 cents to get my shirt back out. Ex-girlfriend cheated on me. Guy lied to her about an STD which she now has. Instant karma. Flatmate is a rugby player. Him and his teammate are in the living room and his teammate is bragging about how he's been shagging various girls without a condom, crediting his pull-out game. He's mid-story of how he hooked up with a hockey girl the previous night and used his trusty pull-out method when his phone starts to ring. It was a different hockey girl that he got with 2-3 weeks before, calling to tell him she was pregnant. A guy and some of his friends were crossing the street when the light said not to. This was on the day of the St. Patrick's Day parade in Chicago, so there was a lot of people downtown and everyone was drunk and crossing the street when they shouldn't be. When the car they were walking in front of honked at them, the guy got mad and started yelling at the driver, and the driver and him get into an argument of sorts where they trade some vulgar hand signs. At the end, the guy flips off the driver and then spits on his window. A few seconds later we hear sirens and see lights flashing. The cops stop right in front of the guy and his friends and arrest him. When I was 8 or 9, my best friend and I were outside late at night while it was below freezing. We had the idea of pouring water over the sidewalk so it would freeze by morning. The next morning we went to check our contraption and, to our surprise, it worked. We were having fun sliding around on the ice when the neighborhood bully showed up. He was around 14 and twice my size. Being the dong he was, he headbutted me but then immediately lost his footing on the ice. It was comical. His arms were flailing trying to keep his balance as his feet were kicking out from under him, going on for what felt like an eternity. Eventually he fell and hit his head hard. He cracked his skull and had to be rushed to the emergency room. The best part was that he had some wrapped candy in his pockets that fell out, which I claimed as my own. TLDR, neighborhood bully headbutted me, I see sidewalk headbutted him back, and I won candy. I was in line at Walmart between two people. The woman in front of me was buying groceries with a food stamp card, along with a bunch of school clothes for a little girl she had with her. When the woman in front of us couldn't afford all the clothes she had in the cart, the little girl started bawling. Her poor mom was miserably embarrassed, telling the little girl they'd come back later for more clothes, etc. And that's when the beach behind me started making loud remarks about how ethnic group shouldn't have more kids than they can afford, and how we were already buying her groceries, etc. I handed the woman in front of me my debit card and told the beach behind us to go duck herself. It was kind of ugly. Well, while I'm standing there and the lady and her daughter were thanking me, the beach who was behind us had her card declined and had to leave the store without her items. It was a beautiful thing. I was sitting as a guest at dinner at a wedding reception. People were tapping their glasses to get the bride and groom to kiss. One guy at my table got really obnoxious with it and started banging on the glass vase centerpiece, loud and hard. He kept doing it, over and over, every couple of minutes. Bong 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 bong, until finally it went bong 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 ploop. The vase didn't shatter. Instead he put a hole in it. A spoon-sized piece of glass broke away and the vase, which was a good 20 inches tall and filled with water, began to empty as water poured out the hole like a spigot, directly into his wife's lap. I felt bad for her, but oh man, that was gratifying. I was in the passing lane on the highway slowly coming up on a couple of cars in the right lane. The speed limit was about to decrease ahead and another car came up behind me going pretty fast. Instead of gazing it to get ahead of the traffic to my right, I slowed down and pulled in behind them, with the car behind me right on my ass. Once I got into the right lane, the car floored it and passed me honking the horn, and the passenger's body was half out of the car window yelling at me and flipping me off as they passed. Turns out the car I pulled in behind was an unmarked state trooper who promptly pulled them over. Justice. Back in college, I was crossing the street when this a-hole on a motorcycle decided pedestrians shouldn't be allowed to cross in the crosswalk, blew the red light and nearly ran me down. I stood there a second, annoyed, but thought, nothing I can do about it, when another motorcycle came past me. This time it was a police officer. He looked at me, grinned broadly and gave me a thumbs up, and then pulled over the other guy and gave him a ticket. Mentioned this in a NYC thread some months back. I was at a crosswalk in Brooklyn looking left, then right, then left again. A guy in a suit pauses a yelling cell phone conversation to snicker at me, saying, "It's a one-way, bro." No sooner had he set foot in the intersection than he has a mild collision with a bicyclist going the wrong way. Neither was hurt enough to slow down, and as the cyclist rode off, The two competed to see who could say, "Watch where you're going" the loudest. It was a tie. I was on safari in Kenya with my slightly psychotic family. It was the morning of departure and we had to get from the safari lodge to the airstrip and then fly back to Nairobi. The plan was to have one safari jeep full of our luggage, which would go straight to the airstrip. The other safari jeep would take my family on one last excursion to see some animals before heading to the airstrip. I enter the safari jeep last and I take the only available seat at the very back. Not a very good seat to spot animals from. Suddenly, my sister starts freaking the duck out and screaming at me for taking that seat. WTF. I had already had enough of her drama from all the previous days, so I just got out of the jeep and went to sit in the other jeep, which was going straight to the airstrip. We started driving and I was prepared to have to wait for my family at the airstrip in the blistering heat while they're out looking for animals. But then, about 10 minutes into the drive, I suddenly spot a herd of no less than 15 elephants. I asked the guide if we can get any closer. He literally drove right into the middle of the herd. I was surrounded by elephants of all ages. We were so close. It was truly an amazing sight. So the guide used his walkie-talkie to inform the other guide that he should bring the rest of my family here. We stayed there for a good 10 minutes as we watched the herd slowly walk from the field into the bushes. By the time my family arrived at the scene, it was too late. All the elephants had migrated into the bushes and were nowhere to be seen. And guess whose favorite animal is the elephant? My sister's. When I was 17 I was driving around with some friends. I was in the back seat of the driver's side. After stopping at Wendy's we were driving back home and we passed by this really mean girl's house. I told the driver to stop and I jumped out of the car and chucked my large Frosty at her bedroom window. I ran back to the car and before I was all the way in I said go. My foot was still outside the car. It got dragged under the tire and my foot got ran over. Oh god, the crunching and popping I felt hurt. Somehow I didn't break my foot, though it does click pop when I walk. I never vandalized anything again. It was a warning. The gods were telling me to knock it the duck off. I definitely listened. Was out for dinner with my then fiancée, now wife, and her dad, my now father-in-law. He's a bit of a dong to her. He got divorced and remarried. Loves those kids more than my wife. Gives a shit over too many things, etc. So we're at the end of dinner. Father-in-law offers to pay for the meal. Okay, that's nice. My wife asks to get her leftovers boxed and she'll take them home. He starts with, well, you'll just leave them in the fridge, then they'll just get thrown out. Blah blah. I tell him, listen, it's not your fridge, leave her alone. She and I live together at this point. He gets all mad. Don't tell me how to raise my daughter. I reply, then don't speak to my fiance that way. He literally throws the bill and folder thing at me and says fine. You duck, I'll pay then, and storms out. Okay, now everyone is pissed. I am. My fiance is saying why did you have to start something, etc. So I pay the bill and I'm just waiting for the receipt. Like we're waiting 10 minutes here. What the hell is going on? Tensions are rising. Her dad is waiting outside, just building up steam and ready to blow once we get out there. I ask the waiter, can I just get our bill and go? Oh no sir, you have to wait for the manager. Turns out they have a contest running where every bill is a winner. Normally you'll win a free drink or appetizer with your next meal. Well, we won the mother duckine grand prize, a trip for 4 to Florida. Whoever pays gets the prize. Well, guess what, ducker? I paid because you stormed out like an a-hole. Karmasay Beach. I was about 7 and on a family trip to Florida. My grandfather and I were walking in the water by the shoreline and I kept seeing a weird shadow. I told my grandfather about it and that he should move, but he just smiled and ignored me. He stepped in a stingray 2 minutes afterward. To be fair, I did still believe in monsters in my closet, so it's not like I was the most reliable source of information. Edit. He stepped on a stingray. I should also mention it stung him and he ended up in the ER for a couple hours. Working freight in retail, I was the shoe department supervisor and had 6 carts to do. My friend who was supervisor for the men's department had 3 left to do when I was walking by her with my last cart. I decided to be a snot and tease her for still having freight to do. Not 5 seconds later I just barely bumped my cart into a shelf and all my show boxes were knocked off and about half of them fell open so that the shoes came out. Whoa, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content, bruh. It's free and that's a great price.